مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. تناولت الصحف الغربية استحقاق الانتخابات البرلمانية في تونس، حيث وصفته على نطاق واسع بأنه صوري وسيؤدي إلى برلمان يقوض حقوق المرأة. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة حول هذا الملف ينضم إلينا البروفيسور غوردون غراي، الأستاذ في كلية الشؤون الدولية بولاية بنسلفانيا الأمريكية وسفير الولايات المتحدة في تونس سابقا. بروفيسور غوردون، مرحبا بك معنا.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
لماذا وصفت انتخابات تونس بالصورية؟ وما السر وراء عزوف الناخبين عن المشاركة؟
Well, I think it wasn't just the Western media platforms that were describing it that way. It was also Tunisian civil society. I think the Tunisian people expressed their views on the election by not participating. The initial participation rates were only reported as 8.8%. They were then boosted by 11 to 11.2%, which attracted considerable skepticism in Tunisia. But even it doesn't really matter. 8.8% or 11.2% is just a terrible turnout. It shows the lack of legitimacy of President Said's constitutional and political project. And I think it reflects more. It reflects what the Tunisian people want. They're facing food shortages. They're facing high inflation. They're not interested in the vanity projects of former constitutional law professors. They're interested in getting food on the table for their families. I think that's totally understandable. I don't think that's limited to the Tunisian people, but I do think it explains why the turnout was so low.
هناك من يقول إن سبب فشل الانتخابات هو سعي قيس سعيد من خلال مراسم الترشح إلى إلغاء دور الأحزاب من خلال التصويت للأفراد. هل فشلت خطته؟
Well, I think there were some structural factors that led to what you correctly label as the failure of this election. One was the requirement that candidates had to get 400 signatures. So this disadvantaged candidates or people who were interested in running but didn't have the money or the political clout to gather that many candidates. So that was one structural flaw. Another structural flaw was the abolition of the previous requirement that party lists include gender parity. And what that led to was a very high percentage of women parliamentarians in the fairly elected parliamentary elections. The figures I saw were far more dismal. I think it was 12% of the folks elected in these December 17th parliamentary elections were female. That's a real drop, and it's an unfortunate decrease.
نتيجة الانتخابات هل تعيد المعارضة إلى الواجهة؟
Well, I think it shows that the opposition parties, even though they're not united, but I think one thing that unites them is opposition to Said's unconstitutional moves, and I think they can fairly claim they more accurately represent the will of the people. They called for a boycott, and it looks like it was adhered to. If take your pick, 8.8% or 11.2%. Either way, that's either 88.8% or 91.2% boycotted the election. Either way, that's a pretty high percentage.
باعتقادك ماذا ستكون وظيفة البرلمان التونسي الجديد؟
Well, unfortunately, the new Tunisian parliament isn't going to have much work to do because it doesn't have much power. It will serve in effect as an advisory council, but I don't think that there's no mechanism for Said to have to listen to what they say. the constitutional referendum on July 25th, which didn't have a very high participation rate either, although it's higher, about 28%, stripped the Tunisian parliament and of the checks and balances that had been so carefully put into the 2014 constitution, because the framers of that constitution wanted to make sure that the excesses of the Ben Ali regime wouldn't be repeated.
إذا ما بنينا على حديثك ومع استمرار تعثر الاقتصاد وتدني شعبية الرئيس، لكن لماذا لم يترجم ذلك إلى احتجاجات لاستعادة الديمقراطية؟
Well, yes, I think there's a measure of truth to the situation they described. There was a tremendous dissatisfaction with what I would call establishment politicians, and perhaps we could call it politics as usual, in the run-up to the 2019 elections, and particularly the presidential elections. That's why in the two candidates who emerged with the most votes and then went into the second round runoff, one was Nabil Karawi, who, although he was an establishment figure as a media magnate, he was a political outsider, if you will. And the other one was Kais Said, who is a constitutional law professor without any party affiliations, was also a political outsider. So I think that the 2019 presidential elections underscored the dissatisfaction that the Tunisian people had with the lack of progress by the political class on addressing their very real economic needs.
صحيفة الجارديان ذكرت أن البرلمان الجديد يقوض حقوق المرأة، حيث يسيطر الذكور على غالبية المقاعد. هل تتفق؟ أليس هذا هو قيس سعيد الذي عين أول امرأة في منصب رئاسة الوزراء في دولة عربية؟
Well, I think 2 points. One is on the first point, it's not clear how much power the prime minister has. I think she's viewed in Tunisia as someone who's trying her best, but she doesn't have the same powers that prime ministers in since 2011 have had. And second, there's just no doubting that one can't doubt that there's less female representation in the new parliament. I mean, the gender, as I mentioned before, the elimination of the gender parity laws, we saw the result right away.
هذا الأسبوع تم الأمر بحبس علي العريض القيادي الإخواني البارز في قضية التسفير والمتهم فيها أيضا الغنوشي. ما الذي يعنيه ذلك؟ هل بدأت مرحلة العدالة لمحاسبة الإخوان في تونس؟
Well, I think what it means is that President Said has an unfortunate, from his perspective, election result on Saturday, and on Monday, seeking to deflect either calls for his resignation, which came from the opposition, or attention in general to the dismal turnout. He arrested the vice president of the Nada party. I think he was probably seeking to stoke secular Islamist tensions, to use those to his advantage. But I would note that the arrest of the former prime minister and the current vice president of the Nada party was very clearly opposed by Najib Shebi, who is a leading opposition leader who is definitely from the secular side of the spectrum. So I don't think President Said's attempts at deflection succeeded, but there you go.
باعتقادك هل سيستمع سعيد لصوت الشارع ونداءات المعارضة والمجتمع المدني والاتحاد العام للشغل؟
Let me give you one specific example that suggests he's not going to change. President Said was here in Washington, D.C. last week for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. And during his visit here, he met with the editorial board of the Washington Post. And the article on that meeting said he was very defensive, that he blamed the criticism on foreign forces, that outsiders weren't getting a full picture of what was going on in Tunisia. And frankly, I had a flashback to when I was serving in Tunisia as the U.S. ambassador under Ben Ali, when we heard the exact same thing. I think it's a very typical autocratic response to deflect blame onto foreign forces. And it also suggests, to answer your specific question, that he's probably not going to change and probably not going to listen to advice from friends.
بروفيسور غوردون غراي، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
It was my pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation.
مشاهدينا، شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.